Baker Mayfield's final season with the Browns was a complete disaster. Going from a strong sophomore campaign where the Browns made the playoffs, everything seemed to fall apart. Yes, Mayfield was injured. He tore the labrum in his left shoulder early, and then in Week 10 against the Patriots, he suffered a knee strain too. But even when he factored those injuries in, Mayfield's performance was still bad. How did a quarterback go from looking like a top 10 player to falling apart so quickly? In this video, my goal is to answer this question. I started by looking at his 2022 playoff film, and then I worked my way through his 2021 season too. What I found was really interesting. Before we start, if you can do me a huge favor and like and subscribe to my channel, I would greatly appreciate it. So anyways, like many of my breakdowns, I like looking at advanced stats to show you how a player performed when compared with their peers. One of my favorite charts for quarterbacks is comparing Pro Football Focus's big time throws against their turnover-worthy plays. This chart is pretty illustrative. It does a good job of showing how a player views potential risk versus reward. Starting at the top left, you have your good quarterbacks that manage risk well with a low turnover-worthy percent, and they also create big plays. Aaron Rodgers and Tom Brady are consistently at the top. Baker Mayfield was in this quadrant back in 2020. He was one of the better QBs in the NFL, and his other advanced stats show the same. For example, he was 9th in expected points added when you factor in completion percentage over expected. Also, he was 12th in adjusted net yards per attempt. When you look at his 2021 season though, this is where things got really bad. Mayfield's parameters from a risk versus reward standpoint completely changed. He was more willing to send the ball into a non-ideal situation. His turnover-worthy percent went up about 1%, which equates to about 5 more turnovers per season if he threw for the same number of passes. His other advanced stats show a similar trend. His expected points added when you factor in completion percent over expected dropped down to 23rd. Also, his adjusted net yards per attempt, that dropped to 26. Clearly something was off. And the obvious thing is his injuries, but in my opinion, if you blame everything on those injuries, you're missing the nuance of football. Before we look at our first example, I want to give a huge shout out to HelloFresh for sponsoring this week's video. HelloFresh is here to make eating better and easier. No grocery stores with stressful meal planning, just everything to prepare a wholesome, delicious meal all delivered to your door. This week, my wife and I tried the bulgogi pork tenderloin. It was so incredibly good. The produce was fresh and had a ton of flavor, the meat was portioned perfectly for both to share, and the recipe was so easy to follow it made the entire experience effortless. They have foolproof step-by-step recipes that make cooking simple and fun. Now, not only was everything delicious, but HelloFresh helps you eat more sustainably. They were the first carbon-neutral meal kit company, and nearly all their packaging is recyclable. Also, they help you cut down your food waste by at least 25% compared to grocery shopping. If you go to HelloFresh.com and use my code SAMGOLD16, you can get 16 free meals and 3 surprise gifts. Again, go to HelloFresh.com and use my code SAMGOLD16 to get 16 free meals and 3 surprise gifts. So back to the breakdown, let's look at our first example. This play against the Patriots does a great job of showing how his decision-making was lacking this past season. In this play, Mayfield threw a terrible interception where 2 defenders could have picked it off. Let's start from the beginning. The Patriots are lining up with a single high safety before the snap. Meanwhile, the Browns were an empty set shotgun look with 3 receivers to the open side of the field. After the play began, the Patriots rotated their safeties into a 2 high safety defense or cover 2 on this one. Now for context, throughout this game the Patriots were playing a lot of 1 high safety defenses like cover 1 and cover 3. Those are 2 of the Patriots' favorite coverages, especially on third down. Regardless of that context though, Mayfield still has to check the safeties after the snap. He still needs to figure out where they're lining up, and that should give him a clue on where to throw the ball. For example, if they rotate just like they did here, this should tell Mayfield that the out route to the tight end will likely be covered. Mayfield obviously didn't do this. He was hell-bent on getting the ball to his tight end in timing, and that's why he was picked off. For the record, the route run by David Njoku wasn't ideal. He drifted a bit at the top and he didn't come back to the ball. However, this route was still covered perfectly by the defense. Not only that, the sideline zone defender who was passing the fade route to the safety, he also would have picked it off. What worries me about this play is that since Mayfield is trying so hard to stay in rhythm with the offense, he's not fully reading the defense after the snap. He never saw the rotation of the safety, and this is where this play went wrong. The pre-snap look of a single high safety was fine to look to his right, but the moment that the Patriots shifted to a 2 high look or cover 2 defense, Mayfield should have come off his initial read. He should have moved on to the drag route from the opposite side, and that's where the ball should have gone. Earlier, I did mention that Mayfield injured his knee during this game. He left in the 3rd quarter, and Case Keenum played the rest of the snaps. While injuries suck and they do have a material impact on a quarterback, you can't blame a knee injury he suffered 2 quarters after a play that happened on the 2nd drive. Also, Mayfield was amazing in his previous game against the Bengals. In Week 9, he threw for 218 yards and 2 touchdowns, and overall he looked way better than the stats showed. We'll look at 2 plays from that game in a minute, but that was one of his best games of the season. So, to blame his non-throwing shoulder and a future knee injury for a poor decision, that obviously seems wrong. Now, speaking of that game against the Bengals, Mayfield played really well in this one. Seriously, it was one of his best performances I've seen. Yes, his surface level stats only look average, however, he did play really well. Check out this play in the 4th quarter. Before I begin, the Browns were already up 34-16. They were faced with a 3rd and goal from the Bengals' 18-yard line. In order to stop any throw into the end zone, the Bengals sent a 6-man rush while dropping 5 defensive backs onto the goal line. Since Mayfield knew the running back would be staying behind a block, he started his race to the left to take advantage of the one-on-ones to the open side of the field. The moment that Rashard Higgins crossed the face of his defender, Mayfield knew he had the advantage with David Njoku. Njoku widened his route to force the defender to flip his hips towards the sideline. It was at that point that Mayfield knew he had the defense beat. He launched the pass with perfect timing, and Njoku caught it for the score. While this play was great, the play that set up this throw was even better. Look at the bottom of your screen. The Bengals were lining up in a single high safety cover 1 look, and Mayfield knew he had an excellent one-on-one matchup outside. There was only one place to throw this pass. Any further to the inside and it's an easy pick for the safety, while if the pass is underthrown, the trailing corner can break it up. Mayfield threw a perfect throw up the sideline, and he set up that touchdown that we just talked about a few plays later. Now, it's very easy to show highlights and lowlights for a quarterback. This is especially true when we're talking about Baker Mayfield. The truth is that his highs are very high, but his lows are equally low. He's a roller coaster in that sense, and the 2021 season cranked it up to an 11. One thing I did notice as I went back through his film last season and compared to this year was that he was under pressure a lot more this year than last. He was under pressure only 25% of the time last year, and he was under pressure on 30% of his dropbacks this season. While that difference doesn't seem huge, it's a big difference for a quarterback like Mayfield. Some quarterbacks tend to perform a lot worse under pressure as compared to their peers. In my opinion, Mayfield is one of those guys. If your team has a bad offensive line, and I'm looking at the Panthers when I say this, then him under pressure could be a problem. There's an obvious reason why the Panthers drafted Ikem Ekwonu in the 1st round. Hopefully he'll help them up front. Going back to Mayfield though, not only were there on-the-field issues, but there were also off-the-field issues too. There were rumors that he didn't take his quarterbacking as seriously as he should. There's a rumor he played 3 straight 10-hour days of Halo right before his game against the Packers. If y'all remember what happened in that game, the Browns lost by 2 points while Baker threw 4 interceptions. Perhaps his most egregious pick came in the 1st quarter. You have a Yankee concept featuring a deep post and over. Depending on how the free safety reacts in cover 3, you can usually just throw it to the other receiver. The safety bailed deep, so Mayfield should have thrown the ball to the over. That's not what Mayfield did though. He launched the ball deep down the middle, and the safety picked it off. For the record, and any time you do an armchair analysis like we're doing here, you have to fully admit that you don't know the game plan or the playbook. However, this game was bad from start to finish. It was objectively terrible. Mayfield missed open throws, and for a lack of better word, he just seemed off. He threw a 58% completion rate, where next-gen stats expected him to throw at 67%. The receivers were there, but Mayfield simply missed. Again, you can't blame him for everything, but I think it's reasonable to say that he screwed up enough in this one where you can definitely point your finger. Now, overall, what I learned from going through his film and by looking at his advanced stats can be summed up into a few points. First, Mayfield was much more willing to take a risky throw this season as compared to last. This is injury independent. The injuries definitely capped his upside though. It's very possible that some of his high-level accuracy was lost simply due to him being injured. Like this pick against the Packers. Did he throw it this poorly and not shift his weight properly because of his knee injury he suffered back in week 10? Well, it's hard for me to say, and I'm not going to dive into that further because it's impossible to know for certain. But what I do know without a doubt is that Mayfield made more mental mistakes this year as compared to last. If he wants to rebound back to his 2020 abilities, these will need to be cleaned up. So this offseason, the Browns just traded Mayfield to the Panthers. I'm honestly relieved for Mayfield that he's getting a fresh start. Call me biased or call me something else, but I'm still a believer in his abilities. I still believe that he has the upside and the potential to be a franchise quarterback. He showed a lot in 2020, even though his 2021 season was really bad. In my opinion, the Panthers trading for him and getting the Browns to pay for half of his salary was a really smart move. I honestly wish the Seahawks or the Commanders did the same. Worst case, and I truly do mean this, is that if Mayfield doesn't play to the level that you want, this trade and his contract didn't cost a lot, and so the Panthers can just move on. Well, that's all I have for you. I really hope you enjoyed this video. Again, I want to thank you so much for your patience. I mentioned this last time, but I just started a new job, and I'm going to be a bit slower at producing content this summer. I really do appreciate you for watching. If you can do me a huge favor and like and subscribe to the channel, I would greatly appreciate that. Also, if you want to find me on Twitter, you can follow me at Samuel R. Gold.